everyone, to Liberty Hill's 2021 Upton Sinclair Virtual Event. I am so honored to be joining you this evening. Even though we can't be together in person yet, I'm hopeful about the future, and I look forward to the day when we can gather as a beloved community again. As a past honoree and recipient of the Upton Sinclair Award, this event has always held a special place in my heart. I am so proud of the accomplishments of this year's honorees for their commitment to this critical work. When I think about this year's theme, the march to progress continues, it's not hard to reflect on the many dedicated activists who toiled their way through history so that we could stand proudly in this moment, unafraid, undeterred, and motivated to bring about a more just and equitable future we know is possible. The spark of progressive activism that flared through historical figures like Upton Sinclair and John Lewis and Fannie Lou Hamer, it still burns brightly today, doesn't it? I think of the millions of student climate activists who in 2019 held the largest global protest in history, demanding that people wake up and get active in time to save the planet. I've been proud to see this new generation of activists like Varshini Prakash, who started the Sunrise Movement to stop the climate crisis, and community leaders like Ulysses Hernandez take up the mantle to fight for initiatives such as Measure J, which will invest millions of dollars in youth development and the transformative alternatives to incarceration right here in Los Angeles, which Homeboy Industries epitomizes. I'm on their board. Before the world shut down due to the pandemic, I stood alongside another courageous young activist and Liberty Hill partner named Naleli Kobo. She spoke at one of our Fire Drill Friday rallies to demand action on the climate crisis and an end to the toxic neighborhood oil drilling poisoning our communities. Naleli witnessed the devastation environmental racism wreaks on frontline communities of color firsthand. She's been fighting big oil interests and their toxic operations most of her young life, pushing local officials to protect vulnerable communities. Now she's facing major health battles of her own due to the effects of the oil wells in her neighborhood right next to her house. But she's not giving up the fight, and neither will we. This is not a drill. Our house is on fire, and we need to act like it if we want to ensure a livable planet for future generations. I often say California is the front line of change. Well, it is. We are the world's 5th largest economy. What happens in California doesn't just impact Californians or even the US. It impacts the world. That's why, like Liberty Hill, I have always stood with local activists on the front lines. From my days in the Indochina Peace Campaign, in the 70s, working with Liberty Hill to bring rent control to Santa Monica, focusing on the health issues confronting at-risk girls and younger women when I was living in Atlanta, and fighting to stop oil drilling in LA neighborhoods with Naleli. And most recently, joining the Anishinaabe Ojibwe in their fight to stop Enbridge Line 3, bringing dangerous tar sands oil through Minnesota. Thanks to Liberty Hill and their partners at coalitions like Stand LA and the leadership and bravery of community activists like Naleli and Ulysses Hernandez and countless others, we're making progress and will continue to lead the way. When my friend Sarah Pillsbury and her cohorts founded Liberty Hill in 1976, they saw past the limits of the current moment and looked toward the future they hoped to create. And that's what I believe we're called to do today. We have to be brave enough to look forward and have the resilience to push through the inevitable setbacks and the strength to keep fighting against all odds. Liberty Hill understands that funding and fueling activism, supporting the people fighting for change on the ground in communities, is a critical way to make lasting progress possible. That's why we're all here tonight, albeit virtually, to celebrate the hard-won progress, to acknowledge the shoulders we stand on and continue to uplift and support those closest to pain and injustice. If we can do that, we can create the beloved community that Dr. King spoke about, a place where all people are valued, respected, and treated with dignity. And injustice anywhere is seen as a threat to justice everywhere. So let's keep fighting to make that future a reality.
Thank you for joining us for the 2021 Upton Sinclair Virtual Event. The March to Progress continues. Please welcome Liberty Hill Foundation Board Co-Chair, Jared Rivera.
Wow, what a welcome from the amazing and iconic Jane Fonda. I'm Jared Rivera, co-chair of the Liberty Hill Board of Directors, and I'm also very excited to welcome you to the 2021 Upton Sinclair Virtual Event on this very special Earth Day 2021. Before we kick off the evening, I just wanted to acknowledge the unique moment we find ourselves in as we grapple with the emotions surrounding this week's guilty verdict in the Chauvin trial. We have already seen the loss of yet more young Black and brown lives, including Adam Toledo and Ma'Khia Bryant. We've seen the continued rise of anti-Asian American hate crimes. As we gather tonight to celebrate the progress we have made locally in the face of the pandemic, I wanted to take a moment of silence to honor the lives and memory of these young people and all those lost to violence. Thank you. If you don't know about the Liberty Hill Foundation, we are the home for progressive LA. And we fund and fuel the social justice activism and organizing that changes laws and minds across Los Angeles. I wanted to give a huge thank you to our co-founders, Sarah Pillsbury, Wynn McCormick, Ann Mendel, and Larry Jans, for their vision to start a foundation like Liberty Hill that thinks about philanthropy differently. I also want to thank our generous event sponsors, because without you, tonight would not be possible. I'm looking forward to a great evening, so let's get started. We're so excited to honor some major champions of justice this year, including philanthropic leader and CEO emeritus of the Weingart Foundation, Fred Ali. Let's check out this short tribute to the incomparable Fred Ali.
Philanthropy and politics have in common that egos and bluster sort of rule the day.
We could use a dose of humility. We could use a dose of being better listeners and better engagers.
And the thing about Fred is he's fostered a much more collaborative and much more progressive culture in philanthropy. He's changed the culture of LA philanthropy.
He demonstrates leadership through humility and leadership through listening and leadership through engaging.
I've had the good fortune to spend a lot of time with him. We've laughed together, we've built things, we've pushed for change. But I think his legacy in LA, he's known for always creating space for those most proximate to the work.
For a philanthropic leader to be so clear and principled and committed to what does it look like to live into equity as a funder.
Fred's very interested in investing in leaders for Los Angeles, right? And not just investing funds, right, which is definitely a role of philanthropy, but also investing in mentorship and guidance for leaders.
Fred has a gift for wisdom, just that kind of grounded, values-based, value-centered, common sense wisdom.
He's carved a place that's really unique as a leader in philanthropy who understands racism, sexism, homophobia, all the isms, and works against them.
You believed in me and inner city struggle, and your investment has made such a difference in our capacity to build power, to invest in grassroots leadership and make a change for an equitable, dignified East Side of LA.
He's earned the right to rest, to play, to reflect, to have the kind of time off that people who have put in their time and done the job well deserve.
Brother Fred, I'm gonna miss you, man. You better return my phone calls. That's number one. Number two, don't go fishing yet. You got too much work to do. And we need your passion, we need your energy, we need your spirit, we need your sense of humor.
Fred, you are truly a fan favorite. I'm so excited to honor you tonight. Your leadership has always been steady, precise, and honest. I'm excited to see what comes next because you're too good to be done with anything.
We can't say that you're going to be missed because your impact will continue to be felt.
Please welcome Liberty Hill President and CEO, Shane Murphy Goldsmith.
Hi, everyone. So good to see you all. Hi, Fred.
Hello, Shane. How are you? Thank you for that beautiful video. I'm really humbled.
Did you like it?
I loved it. I loved it. I love Liberty Hill Foundation.
Oh, we love you. Well, I am so excited to celebrate you and honor you tonight. As you know, but our audience may not, Fred Ali has for many years been a mentor to me, a friend to me, has invested so much in me personally and in Liberty Hill. And I just couldn't be happier to honor you. The only thing that would make me happier is to be doing it in person, where you could get the standing ovation of hundreds of people in a ballroom that you deserve. So just know that we're cheering for you and laughing at your jokes, and there would be a standing ovation at the end if this were live.
Shane, we get to do this now in pajama bottoms, so it's
don't give away my secret. All right. Well, in case you're wondering, this is not pre-recorded. This is live. So, Fred, you have a tremendous amount of power to do something crazy. But I trust that you will.
You like to share?
I like your shirt. Our theme tonight is The March to Progress Continues. I love it. I hear your two daughters are here tonight, Fred, and lots of admirers. So, Fred, you have been doing this work in social justice for over 50 years. So tell us what life experiences motivate you to do the work that you've done.
Well, so, you and I have talked a lot about this during our breakfasts and lunches, which I always love. And, I guess it's a lot of things just sort of coming together. I mean, it probably starts with, as I've told you before, I had a very bad speech impediment growing up and was bullied and ridiculed, quite frankly, as a result of that. And oftentimes made me feel very alone and less than. And I think that experience sort of always stayed with me. And then there was other things, certainly poverty, an unjust war, working later on in my college years in a migrant farm worker community, El Viso up in Santa Clara County, and then eventually going to Western Alaska as a volunteer teacher right out of college, and where I worked as a teacher in Western Alaska and eventually as an organizer, and had an opportunity, a sad opportunity in some respects, to witness firsthand sort of the devastating impacts of racism and colonialism on the people of Western Alaska. So, I guess I came to realize as a result of all of that, Shane, that the world is neither equitable or just. And that sort of understanding has fueled me, really for all my adult life. And, thinking about this question, I hope you'll indulge me, because I was reading recently an interview with the Chicano playwright, Luis Valdez. And he said something that, if you don't mind, I want to read. He said, "The earth is like a garden, and if you don't tend to it, it'll get overchoked with weeds. And the weeds are the injustices that continue to grow, and it calls for constant activism. So Shane, as you, that's the kind of life that I chose to lead, and remaining active, remaining vigilant. And as my shirt indicates, the march continues.
I love that. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah.
I mean, as we saw in the intro video, you've touched so many people in Los Angeles and invested in all of the movements that are fighting back those weeds and building a more just Los Angeles as we speak. So Weingart Foundation is one of Liberty Hill's longest running and biggest supporters. So tell us what was that alignment between Weingart and Liberty Hill, and why have you been investing in Liberty Hill for so long?
So I'm so happy to get to answer that question because, wow, I mean, Liberty Hill has been incredibly important to the evolution of the Weingart Foundation. You know this story is I was looking for an opportunity to sort of change the focus of the Weingart Foundation from a funder that was originally focused on capital grants, on direct service grants. And we were looking for an opportunity to also begin funding advocacy and organizing. And it was really Liberty Hill who introduced that to us. I mean, we really embrace this notion of change, not charity. And, through your re-granting activity, you introduced us to some of the best organizing and advocacy groups in the community. You gave us credibility. And over time, a lot of those groups became a regular part, of our grant making program. So it was really, as I look back, as I said, at the evolution of our foundation, it wouldn't have happened in the way it did if it not had been for our collaboration with the Liberty Hill Foundation. So, and for all the donors in this room, if you don't mind me adding this, Liberty Hill performed. I mean, so it wasn't just one grant, it was multiple grants because you always did such a good job. And if you think of all the positive change there's so much more to be done, but if you look at the positive change that has occurred, deincarceration, equitable school funding, ATI, climate justice, these are all things that you've been involved in, and you brought us into a lot of that work. And, I'll be always indebted for that, and indebted to Liberty Hill and your leadership.
Thank you. That means so much to me to hear, and I know to the whole Liberty Hill community. So your T-shirt, "The March to Progress Continues," that's our theme. So I would love to just hear your reflections on, what's your assessment of where we are currently in the march, and what do we need to do going forward to realize our vision for justice and equity in Los Angeles?
Yeah, so, I love the theme, "The March Continues." I'm wearing my shirt. It reminds me of what my dear friend John Mack used to always say, that life's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You can't give up on the trail of social justice, you just have to keep working. And so I would start there. We have a hell of a lot more to do. I mean, if we step back for a moment, 70 million people voted for a racist and ignorant man who failed the American people so greatly. We still, sadly have an epidemic of violence against Black, Brown, Asian American, American Indian, and Alaska Native men and women. As the pandemic has made so crystal clear, with all of its disparate impact, we still suffer significantly the impacts of structural and systemic racism. So going forward, I mean, Shane, we've got a lot of work to do. I mean, a lot has been done thanks to the work of people like yourself and the Liberty Hill Foundation. But when I think about the future, and when I think specifically of what philanthropy can do, I mean, first I would say we have to recognize the importance of the nonprofit sector, especially in this moment, maybe never as important as now, and they needed to be funded in a way that allows them to do the work that's ahead of us. We have to, in all of our work, center anti-racist policies and practices. It's got to be what we center first and and foremost. And finally, I think we have to recognize that power comes from communities. It comes from the communities we work in. And that should compel everyone in philanthropy to invest in movement building and leadership development. And again, I know that's the work of the Liberty Hill Foundation. And quite frankly, it should be the work of all philanthropy.
Well, I agree. Thank you so much, Fred. This has not been enough time. I wish we could spend the whole evening just learning from you and celebrating you, but we do have to wrap up. So any closing words you want to leave us with before you disappear from the screen?
Yeah, I just want to say to all of the people in the audience, continue to support and fund the Liberty Hill Foundation. I was fortunate to spend 22 years allocating millions of dollars, quite frankly, and Liberty Hill is on the top of that list. And so recognize that this is a great investment and keep supporting this great organization. And Shane, thank you very, very much. I love you and love what you're doing. Thank you much.
Thank you so much, Fred. I love you too.
Thank you to our founders for your visionary leadership. We would also like to thank all of the sponsors who made tonight's event possible and all of our dedicated partners who power this critical work. And now, a message from one of our newest corporate partners.
Hi, I'm Nicole Whiteman, the CEO of the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation, and I am so proud to join the entire Liberty Hill community tonight to celebrate the critical work that is pushing the movement for equity and justice forward both locally and across the country. And I want to underscore how proud we are to support your efforts to advocate for those who are denied justice. We truly believe that liberty and justice should belong to us all. We are determined to be part of the solution. Through a social justice lens, we fund proven programs that level the playing field and invest in solutions driven by the communities we serve. This past year, we organized our players and front office staff to take a stand against racism and injustice. We listened, we learned, and we spoke out through our In This Together campaign. Then we put our money where our intentions were. And to date, we have contributed more than $300,000 to Liberty Hill and the California Funders for Boys and Men of Color, Our Kids, Our Future Fund, all to advance their mission to empower young Black and Brown youth. We are committed to using our platform and the voices of our players like Clayton Kershaw to advocate for systemic reform. We are so grateful for the work of Liberty Hill and the countless allies who have offered their support during the trying times of the past year. The Liberty Hill Foundation accomplished so much, but the part that gives me exceptional hope is your focus on future leaders. In the midst of so much uncertainty, your team managed to fund and support 15 rising activist organizations and trained more than 200 community activists to help lead the way to a better America for us all. Your shared belief that the time for equality is now gives us hope, inspiration, and the spark we need to keep the march for progress going today and into the future. When any segment of our community suffers, we all must be part of the healing. Together, I know we can do this. Thank you.
We can't gather together like we usually do, so let's get outside. This is Santa Monica. One of the first campaigns Liberty Hill ever supported was the renters' rights movement that was born right here. I was born right here too. I lived in this building with my mom and my dad and my little brother. My mom died when I was a little kid, and my dad struggled. We lived with the threat of eviction. If not for the rent control that some of you helped win, my dad, brother, and I would have been homeless. I wish I could tell you how alone I felt back then. And I wish I could tell the me of back then that because of you, I wasn't. A year ago in March, COVID-19 fell on a region where tens of thousands experience homelessness and hundreds of thousands live on its edge. You understood what was coming. When we asked you to help, you were there before the question was out of our mouths. You answered the call of the COVID-19 Rapid Response Fund for Community Organizing. You answered the call of the Rapid Response Fund for Racial Justice. Because of those funds, our grantees could help their members keep food on the table, and keep their own lights on. Your courage and generosity had a bigger effect than we could begin to imagine. Now, you remember how 3 years ago we wrote the Agenda for a Just Future? This year, because of you, every pillar of that agenda is looking at transformative victories. If ever there was a time to shut down the largest urban oil field in America, it was during a pandemic that attacks the lungs. This year, the Stand LA Coalition won City Council committee approval of a policy that will end neighborhood oil drilling in Los Angeles. When illegal lockouts and evictions rose, Liberty Hill forged an historic partnership with LA County to help tenants fight back. Now, the Stay Housed Coalition is showing hundreds of thousands of renters the power they have together. And the same youth who marched for Black lives turned that explosion of grief and possibility into the single boldest juvenile justice transformation in America. The Youth Justice Reimagined report that you fought for was adopted by the LA County Board of Supervisors. It will close our youth jails, dismantle our system of youth incarceration, and replace it with a system of youth development. The same people who were locked up and locked out are writing their own futures. Last year, none of you could go anywhere, but all of you showed up. Through Liberty Vote, you drove a bigger election program than ever before. Because Black and brown organizers from here to Georgia mobilized their communities, American democracy still has life in it today. As organizers, we often say, we won't rest until justice is done. And I love us, but that's not a healthy attitude. We have to rest. We come here after terrible losses, carrying enormous grief, but also facing great possibility. We can see the outlines of a just future. This is the original Liberty Hill in San Pedro. This event is called the Upton Sinclair Dinner because Upton Sinclair stood here with striking workers and got arrested for reciting the Bill of Rights. That strike didn't win, but it planted a seed for the modern labor movement. Today, we see what can happen when young people of color dream of freedom. We see what can happen when people refuse to be poisoned for another minute. We see what can happen when renters unite and push back. Let's celebrate that. And then, let's win it all. Let's mourn. And then, let's organize. And let's donate, and let's fight, and let's donate some more. If we make it so, it will happen. Our march to progress continues. I'm so glad that we can walk it together.
Liberty Hill is the home for progressive Los Angeles and a laboratory for social change philanthropy. We believe the people closest to the pain should be closest to the power. We leverage the power of community organizers, donor activists, and other allies to advance social justice through investments in grants, leadership training, and campaigns that change policy across Los Angeles. We will not rest until society provides justice and equality for all.
COVID-19 showed us how not investing in communities had led to most folks dying are Black community members, brown community members, and low-income community members.
In the wake of the pandemic, we really had to kind of address need directly.
It's critically important that if we are going to make it out of COVID-19, we cannot go back to the status quo that our communities were living before.
There's still, tremendous need that needs to be addressed right now. Many people in crisis and having a lot of needs that are unmet, but also we have to keep our eye on what are we building for the future.
If this recovery is going to be equitable, if we are going to address not only the tremendous economic and health consequences of the pandemic, but address the underlying conditions that have made this pandemic so destructive, then we need a just recovery that puts the folks who are most impacted by these problems in the leadership.
I grew up in Northeast LA. I went to all the public schools in this neighborhood. I love my neighborhood. This is where I still live. What I saw around me was, my loved ones getting impacted by the criminal justice system, or what I like to say is the traditional system of injustice. There's still so many people that need to be liberated and supported, and so many that have been in the past left behind that we haven't gone back for. So there's no more space to leave anybody behind. And that's why Measure J is so important.
When the idea for Measure J came along, it was in the midst of this massive movement for racial justice, this national reckoning with white supremacy and racism in America. And we knew that we wanted to translate all of the power of that moment into lasting change.
You would have thought that because this was something transformational that is gonna move dollars to community, that funders would be at the table saying, yes, let's do this, let's fund this. And that just was not the case. But from the get-go, Liberty Hill not only believed in the work, they believed in the vision. It's gonna help us close the oldest jail in LA County. It's gonna help us end the incarceration of women in LA County and LGBTQ+ folks. Measure J will allow us to do all of those things and invest in youth and small businesses, which have been devastated during this global pandemic.
One of the things that Liberty Hill does best is go into communities that no other funders are serving, to go into communities and to constituencies that no one's listening to. And there we find extraordinary leaders who are organizing their communities, who are solving problems in their communities, and we're able to give them the resources they need to really amplify their voices, to bring more people into their movements, and to build the power to make lasting change.
And every change we make in this society comes with struggle, and that struggle is constant, and we have to keep up that struggle to maintain our eyes on the prize.
Our elders are really the reason why we're here today. We stand on the shoulders of the people who have been doing that work for a long time.
And then similarly, we're laying or helping to lay the foundation for further social change in the future.
When I think about John Lewis and Jane Fonda, I'm inspired by thinking about how do I preserve and nurture my own humanity as an activist while I'm fighting for the humanity of others.
I love the story of Liberty Hill's founding. I absolutely love that folks of great privilege, of great wealth, came together and said, we want to turn our resources over to the people who are directly impacted, to the people who are on the front lines of these fights. And we want them to decide how to use the resources. We want them to tell us what we can do to support them, not the other way around.
When I started as the executive director of La Defensa, I, gained the opportunity and the privilege to have resources to donate to different organizations and to different efforts, which I hadn't had before.
I've been at Community Coalition for over 15 years now, and the ability to be in a position now to be able to potentially provide seed funding for the next Community Coalition is something I'm very honored to be able to do.
I am so proud of the Liberty Hill community for meeting this moment. Our donors gave more than ever. In 2020, we tripled our grant making. So I hope every single one of you, if you're not already part of the fight, you'll join the fight. Make a donation. Reach out and find out how you can be part of this movement. That is the solution. If you're feeling powerless, if you're feeling like the problems of the world are too heavy, the antidote to that is to give back, is to make a difference.
The March of Progress will continue.
The March for Progress will continue through me.
The March to Progress will continue through me.
I will not stop fighting to ensure the March to Progress continues.
Donate now to support this critical work and help us ensure the March to Progress will continue.
This is a democracy issue. So fundamentally, what we have to do is we've got to press all of those in Congress, even those on the outside. We've got to put put additional pressure on our elected officials, whether they be Democrat or Republican, to say that we want a free and fair election, that the people deserve that.
All over the country, what we're seeing is that women are already engaged in their communities, they're already active, and they want to do more. They want to do more, not just to resist, but to actually win on the issues that they care about. Things like family care, how they're going to take care of their children and their aging parents. Things like pay equity, how can they actually make ends meet working as hard as they do. And so we're going to be a home to connect women, to offer training and support and resources so that we can actually make progress on the issues that truly should be national priorities.
We matter for this country. We're going to be a determining factor as to whether we move forward for progress, for a future that's inclusive, where our children have an opportunity, where they see themselves as belonging. And so we have a lot of power. Let's exercise that power. We can create a future where we can have immigration reform, where people don't have to live with fear, where our children are not in detention centers, but instead they're playing in playgrounds and in schools.
Time there. But thank you for all of you letting me know you missed my warm and wonderful introduction. I think I said that we're live, clearly, not pre-recorded. And I am so happy to have our amazing honorees tonight, Latasha Brown, Ai-jen Poo, and Angelica Salas. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's quite a thrill to have you. So I wanted to give a little bit more introduction. I think you've all probably seen these folks on the news, the TED Talks. They're quoted constantly in every publication. So you probably know them quite well, but just as a quick reminder, Latasha Brown is co-founder of Black Voters Matter, a fierce advocate who mobilized millions of Black voters in the 2020 election and helped change the political landscape in over 20 states, including their home base of Georgia, where she continues to battle voter suppression. She's also raised millions of dollars to support social justice through community-led funds and donor networks. We're also honoring tonight Ai-jen Poo, co-founder of Supermajority and the National Domestic Workers Alliance. She's a true warrior who's fighting to transform the way women use their power and their voices through the electoral process, all while reimagining our long-term healthcare system with a focus on the dignity of essential domestic workers. She's been hailed most recently for her work to define care and caregiving as infrastructure and helping to ensure that it's included in Biden's infrastructure plans. And finally, Angelica Salas, who's a former honoree, who's joining us tonight, the executive director of CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles. She's a longtime Liberty Hill grantee and one of my very first organizing mentors dating back 20 years. Angelica has built CHIRLA from a local grassroots organization started right here in Los Angeles to a powerful national leader of the immigration movement, mobilizing residents and voters to demand comprehensive immigration reform. So quite a powerhouse we have tonight. I see some clapping. I'm so sorry that you cannot hear the applause that you would be getting if this were in real life. So we all know, sort of what we've seen in the news about you, your bios, but I would love to just get a little bit personal with each of you and just get a sense of how did you get here? Tell us about your organizing journey. How have you translated your personal experiences into your work as an organizer, and how did you get organized? And why don't we start with Angelica?
So good evening, everybody, and thank you, Liberty Hill, for everything you are to Los Angeles. And I want to say, because from Los Angeles, there's a lot of leadership to this country. I also want to say thank you for recognizing in the introduction in the memoriam, our director of organizing, Antonio Bernabé, who passed this year of COVID. He was incredibly in love with Liberty Hill because he really saw that Liberty Hill supported the organizing and the leadership development of the human beings who we were fighting for and with. So thank you. And I wanted to say, it's the organizing for me really was happened as I became more understanding that my story, my individual reality, was actually not just my own, but was actually shared by many other people. And I am an immigrant from Mexico. I came as, now we call them, unaccompanied minors. My mom and my dad were here. They were working here as undocumented workers in the garment industry, construction. And when they had enough money to bring my sister and I, well, they called, they paid a coyote so we could come. And I remember coming as a little child in the dark, trying to make it to my parents. And so for me, my experience was very much about growing up in a family who didn't have status, who finally was able to get immigration status, and how that changed. But then just also growing up in my home, where I always saw family members who had just arrived, uncles, aunts, cousins, who were also undocumented, and just so many stories. But I just thought it was about my family. It wasn't until I was in college that I understand there was a system, that it wasn't just impacting me, but it was a system that denied individuals like me from Mexico, and now from Central America, from Asia, from Africa, the opportunity to come here through to the legal immigration system. And so as I got involved in college in Mecha, very much organized there. But then I think it was really engaging. I started volunteering at Chirla, actually, before I was a staff member at Chirla. And here I met so many incredible people who basically who were organizers in Central America and Mexico, who had come together to really uplift and change their own lives, but also to fight for justice. And I always say that I've learned from our members. That's how I've really grown in my organizing. And then the other place is I had an opportunity, and that's how I met you, Shane, through the Center for Community Change, if you remember. And it was just about working with a lot of organizers who were working on tenant rights, who were working on income supports, who were working on just equity in this country. And I learned from especially a lot of the older organizers who always said to me, and I remember one who said to me, nothing is ever won until people actually benefit from that. And he talked about money in your pocket, a union card in your pocket. And for us, it's a green card or a certificate of naturalization. That's when you win, when you're formally recognized and you're treated like the human being you are. So that's a little bit about how I began in this work. And I just want to say that it's always, you become a better organizer when you surround yourself with the people who are directly impacted, but also by the organizers to stay in this fight, and that you listen a lot and you understand that they have a lot to teach.
Thank you so much, Angelica. It's been such an incredible joy to see you and Chirla soar over the last 20 years. Aijen, tell us your story.
Well, I wanted to start by saying thank you to Liberty Hill for everything you do, and especially the incredible work on the ground in LA that you support. You support the work that is the roots of every effective movement for change that's going to change our country. And create the multiracial democracy and economy that we deserve. And groups like the National Domestic Workers Alliance wouldn't exist were it not for Liberty Hill, because Chirla, the Filipino Worker Center, IDEPSCA, these are the organizations that are the heart and soul of the domestic workers movement and of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. And a number of our founding organizations were LA kick-ass, badass women organizers. And that's why I'm here. That's why we're here. That's why we've been able to win. So I just want to say everyone who supported Liberty Hill should be so proud of what you do. And, for me, I think a few different threads. One is just I was raised by really strong women, my mom and my grandmother, and they did everything. They took care of us. They worked. They were active in the community, and I just thought they walked on water and could do anything. And I thought that because I saw women kind of doing everything, that they would be in charge of everything and have a lot of power and influence in our society. And as I grew older, I think I realized that that was actually not the case, that in fact, women, especially women of color, are still underrepresented in positions of power and decision making, and overrepresented and
Oh no. Come back. They always come back.
Well, this truly is a virtual event. You didn't get on mute, and now we have. So let's celebrate our new reality.
Shoot. Well, it's taking longer than usual for her to come back. So, Latasha, why don't we hear a little bit from you, and then we'll go back to Ajan.
Well, the first thing I did right was the day I started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on. You know, it's in the spirit of that song that has been the shaping of who I am, where there were folk who had the audacity in little bit of old Selma, Alabama, a city in the deep, deep South, that were descendants of formerly enslaved Africans that were brought there to work the land, because at one point, 1/3 cotton production in the world came out of that area. Who had the audacity to believe that they actually could stand in a space, that their fight for voting rights wasn't about them thinking that the vote was more important than who they were, but that they were literally standing in a space to assert their humanity and to assert who they are. And so, you know, it's out of that rich tradition that kind of shaped the foundation of my organizing work, and who I am, you know. And before I go forward, I kind of want to do the same thing that Ajan Poo said as well, that Ajan said around Liberty Hill. Liberty Hill, it has a very, very special place in my heart as well. That years ago, when I was a director of the Gulf Coast Fund for Community Renewal and Ecological Health. And we were creating this model for community-centered philanthropy. You know, we literally, the model, up until that point, I did not know of a model of community-centered philanthropy. You know, and so, you know, we modeled a lot of the work that we were doing after Liberty Hill. Liberty Hill, you know, I actually would call and get advice, and, you know, and they were a thought partner with us through that process. So your work has not only impacted LA, you know, that's what light does. Literally, when light enters the room, it shines. Like you can't stop where the end is. And so, you know, I would even say that, you know, the Liberty Hill model affirmed this idea that we could do community-centered philanthropy, is also the foundation and part of the shaping in my mind of the creation of my own organization, Black Voters Matter. That the work that we would do, that fundamentally is actually Black Voters Matter Fund. Our literally core was that how could we actually engage and support and provide resources to communities. So I just want to say that to Liberty Hill, that your impact, it seems like Ajan is back, that your impact on the shaping of my work in this space, at the intersection of social justice, of philanthropy, right, and community power building, that at that sweet spot, you know, I think Liberty Hill has been a model that many of us have drawn from, that many of us actually still admire, that many of us actually continue to support. So with that, my sister has joined back on, and I want to yield the floor back to you, Ajan. You
Thank you,
are on a roll.
Latasha.
You are on a roll.
Thank you, Latasha. I'm so sorry. I have no idea what happened. My wireless just completely broke down. But I don't know where I got cut off, but just to say that putting my energy towards supporting the workers, the women of color who do the work in our homes that makes everything else possible. The care that makes our lives and our economy function felt like a great way to start building the kind of power that women deserve to shape our economy and shape our future. Yeah, and I've learned so much from great LA organizers, and that's why I'm so happy to be here tonight. I've also learned so much from my sisters, Latasha and Angelica. I honor you so much. Congratulations, and what a joy to be with you tonight.
Thank you so much.
So, as we all know, we're just so much pain and rage and polarization and police and racial violence and injustice all around us. And in our darkest moments, I think we can feel like, what good has it all done? What progress have we really made? And Ajan, you've talked about harnessing the heartbreak. And so I would love to hear from you and Angelica and Latasha as well. How do we harness that heartbreak to build the world that we need and want?
I could just kick us off by saying that I think it's an ongoing process. I think there are new heartbreaks every day. And there's also undeniable progress. The fact that we, despite incredibly sophisticated voter suppression and a pandemic and threats of vigilante violence at the polls and that we still turned out to vote in unprecedented numbers, and we took back our democracy and continue to show up. And thank God for Latasha fighting to protect our democracy on the front lines in Georgia. And we did that. We did that. Organizers did that. Right? And we just have to own that we are resilient and we are powerful. And the heartbreak reminds us that we are alive and we are still here and we are here for each other and we are powerful together. And our job as organizers is to expand the realm of what's possible. And the heartbreak gives us new insight into how we can and must do that.
Thank you so much. Latasha or Angelica, you want to jump in?
Angelica, you want it?
Well, to me, I think it's so important that we actually stay with the pain and the suffering, that we don't look away, that we feel it, because the pain and the suffering gives us a sense of the urgency by which we have to do our work. But it also is not all who we are, and I think that what I see is that you see people who have joy in their heart, who have dreams for their children, for the future generations, and that those dreams and those incredible just feelings of love and possibility keep us going. So we are both. And so both are powerful. They're powerful. We are, we are other people's dreams. I always think about, I am, somebody else's dream who had for me, who didn't know me, but who wanted, immigrant little girl to have an opportunity to go to stay in this country, to go to school, to be able to contribute. And I want to have those same dreams, not only for my daughter and my son, but for all kids and for all others. And so to me, it's the the suffering, the pain, the injustice just tells you keep going. It's and demand things faster. Don't delay. What you can get today is something that will diminish the pain and suffering for people today. And so to me, it's that. And I also think that when you disconnect from that suffering and that pain, it allows you not to feel. And to me, I think we have to feel. We have to feel. We have to have those emotions. We have to be connected to them, and they have to give us that. And connect with our anger too, because I sometimes think, don't be angry. No, I want to be angry about what is wrong. But I'm not just going to stay in that. I'm also going to use all the love and the support and that solidarity to keep us going. So it's important, and I also think that it does have to be harnessed, as Aijin said it so well.
And the thing that, kind of in the same spirit of adding what both of my sisters have shared is that, it's oftentimes we look, particularly in a culture like in Western culture in America, it's we often look at the goal is to literally avoid or block out or ignore pain, right? And not really understand that while part of the process of alleviating pain is really understand what the purpose of the pain, right? That pain has a purpose. That part of the reason why pain actually saves our lives. That we experience pain when something is wrong in our body, it actually lets us know it's a warning sign that something is out of order, something is out of alignment, right? And so it gives us the opportunity to attend whatever that is, the ailment that is in our body. It is the pain that actually is a warning sign to let us know. And so what we have to also recognize in this space is that pain isn't an observation, is an observationist a sport. That what is pain actually teaching us? To actually seeing the pain of others, seeing the pain of millions is actually telling us that there is something wrong. There's a misalignment in the body of this nation, that there's a misalignment around the economics, there's a misalignment around the criminal justice system, there's a misalignment with every single system. And so because of that, what we have to do is not ignore the pain or step over the pain or act like we don't see the pain, but literally lean into it, right? So that we can recognize what has to be alleviated, right? For us to get rid of the pain, for us to uproot the pain. And so part of what I think is, in this moment, what we're experiencing in this country, I was talking to someone earlier around kind of this extreme racial polarization that we're seeing, this outward racism that we're seeing, like all of this, right? While on one hand, I'm traumatized by it. It has been very terrible for myself, my family. It is painful, it is hurtful. While on one hand I hold that, I also have to hold this other part, right? This other part that it has to come to the surface, because what America became very good at is hiding or ignoring the pain, putting a Band-Aid over a heart attack, right? Literally being able to bury the dead, right? Without really having any acknowledgement, like they didn't even see any dead bodies. My point is that all of this is coming to the surface. Of what we're seeing come to the surface is giving us an opportunity. We have an opportunity. It's kind of like the fork in the road. We can either go the way of peril or we can go the way of possibilities. And so part of what this pain that we're seeing right now, right, should be pointing to where the possibilities exist for us to stand in a space to lift up humanity, for us to stand in the space to lean into this, and to stand in the space to say we can stop this, to stand in a space that we really deal with the racial justice and the racial inequities in this country, that we literally lift them up. Like I'll just say this, that my challenge has always been, I don't think that the issue in America is we don't know how to get along. We don't know how to disagree. That there has been this context in America that wants to unify everything, which is primarily rooted in this white supremacy frame, that literally everybody is judged by this one way of being, right? And if you're outside of that, when in fact, our power is in our diversity, when in fact, the possibilities lie and exist in our diversity, right? And so, I just offer that for me, even in this space, to Ajin's point, that literally in terms of harnessing, like right now, I think this is a moment for us not to like shield away and want to just cover up and put another band-aid over the pain that has been systemic for centuries in this country. But it's time for us to really, really get to the source of it and uproot it so we can literally treat the real ailment of structural racism in this country.
Amen.
Amen.
Oh my goodness. Our pain will save us. That is holy. Incredible. So, Latasha, I've heard you say or ask, what has COVID come to teach us? So, Latasha, how would you answer that question?
I'll just say, there's a couple of things. I think COVID has, and all of this comes out of I love to talk about my grandmother, because my grandmother will always have these wise sayings that I didn't understand, but now as I get older, I'm like, oh, I get it now. And she would always say, what the devil meant for harm, God will use it for your good. That never made any sense to me, right? But I understood the spirit in what she was raising. It is, what's the opportunities you can look at as a harmful, but you can actually always extract the possibilities and power. And so I think COVID-19 came to teach us a couple of things. I mean, one thing that came to teach us is we are interdependent. If we didn't recognize it, somehow America had taught us that, if you just took care of yourself, that you would be fine, that this whole embracing of individualism, right? That if you had the right health care, if you had the right job, if you had that, all those things, what COVID-19 came back, it reminded us of our humanity. It reminded us, one, of the fragility of human life, that ultimately, that when my health actually has an impact on your health, right? And also has an impact on my neighbor's health, and the same thing, vice versa. And so I think that it actually came to teach us that. I also think it came to teach us around how unsustainable we are living in this country in terms of our work. We're literally like people, I think there's a reordering of even priorities. That at the end of the day, think about it. When COVID-19 first happened, our children, we were like annoyed with that. Like at the end of the day, the very thing that we say we love more than anything in the world was it was a bother. Like we were like, what do you do with these kids? Many of us actually met our families for the first time in a deep way. That we were literally created, like it's recentered kind of the possibilities of really around relationships. Many of us didn't even know our children's learning style, right? And many of us also understood, became real big supporters of giving teachers all of the money too, right? And so, so I think that what COVID did is it literally, I think the three biggest pieces it did, in my opinion, is that one, I think it was a reminder to teach us the lesson of how interconnected we are. Two, I think it was literally around our priorities. That at some point, what we all were going crazy at first because we were trying to continue the same way we had been continuing. Like we were going to do the house, the kids, everything, even though everything had shifted, right? And so we were almost by default forced to get to the place that some things we had to just like, we got to give this up, right? And I think the third thing is, I think it exposed the fragility of democracy in this country. It exposed the fragility of the systems in this country. Even a good financial planner will tell you that if you're supposed to have at least 6 months to a year of savings, right? This country couldn't even take care of her people didn't even have to wield the economic structure that it couldn't even take care of her people for 2 weeks. I mean, for 2 months. After 2 months, it was like, oh, Lord, we getting ready to go broke. But also, it is literally, we've spent money on one warhead, right, that could sustain. And so I think in many ways, it's actually a reorder, and it is a reset moment. So I think that finally, I think the foundation around reset, what are our values, what are our priorities, what do we care about?
Oh, goodness gracious. Thank you. And that is a perfect segue to our last question, which will lead us into the end of the night. So the theme is the march to progress continues. So what do you think is, each of the three of you, what do you think is the most important thing we need to focus on in the year ahead? And what are we up against? Aijen, why don't you go?
Sure. Well, I think that we need to deliver massive structural change in the forms of jobs and equity and opportunity for the American people in this next 6 months, I would say. Unprecedented numbers of people came out to vote, and I think they expect big change coming out of this election and coming out of this pandemic. And I'm really hopeful that we are in the midst of a kind of New Deal moment where we can reset our economic policy and our democracy for this next era to be more equitable. And so we got to do it. We got to push Congress to deliver massive reforms and to do so before August recess. And then we got to go back in our communities and keep organizing and telling the story of how their votes and their participation and their organizing made that happen. And they need to continue to engage so that we can build the country that we so deserve, and so that we can keep this march to progress going in a virtuous cycle. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Angelica, what do you think?
Well, the March for Progress happens when you organize, which is what Liberty Hill supports. When you organize people, are progress. And so that means that we have to invest in the leadership development. There's so many people who have awakened during this moment to say, I want to do something. So we have to have organizations that they can become a part of, where they can contribute their talent, their passion, their vision. That's what we got to do. And I also think that this is also a moment in which we have to see the people who have been holding up this country, this economy. It means looking at the undocumented and not calling them essential, and then still having them be deportable and still seeing them as dispensable in their lives, not valued. It means that we change the laws of this country so that they have good jobs, they have healthcare, they have access to healthcare, and that they have their citizenship papers. That's what it means when we talk about progress. It isn't about saying that we care about you, saying that we recognize you. It's actually taking action by actually giving the individuals what we all deserve. And to me, and that's what it means. And so I think, we are somebody else's progress. I always think that we are part of the march for progress of others. So then we have to keep it going, and we have to demand and take. I just really want to say this: our elected officials need to be held accountable, because under their watch, a lot of these things did not move forward, and therefore we saw the consequences during COVID. And so now, as we see these new opportunities, then they have to be held accountable to take the reins and move forward what the people have asked them to do as part of their vote and as part of what is necessary to move this entire country forward.
Thank you, Angelica. Latasha, last words.
I think three things. I think we need to focus on voice, values, and vision. And voice, what I mean by that is I think the biggest fight that we have is centered around voting rights. I don't think that I don't frame it as the most important. I just think that literally if we allow democracy to be unraveled, all of these other things we talked about with policy, where would they sit? And so I think it's really important for us to really support around making sure that the voices of people in this country are not silenced, that are not marginalized with those who seek to suppress the vote. And so I think we should support the immediate and push for the immediate passage of HR 1 and HR 4 right now, so that we can have sweeping legislation to help support voting rights in this country. The second thing, I raised around values, that fundamentally we can change all the laws we want to in this country. If we're not shifting the political wheel, particularly centered around how we value human beings and how we value human life, it will all be temporary. We will continue to be in this hamster wheel of, okay, are the Republicans into power or the Democrats? Or if the libertarians, or can we push the Democrats, can we push the Republicans? We have to literally move beyond that cycle and go to a space around, I'm not left or right, I'm not Republican or Democrat. I'm human. I'm a human being before I am anything else. And that everything, right, to the extent that literally there is a political party that actually aligns with my values, that's the political party I align myself with, right? And so at the end of the day, we've reduced this space as if everything is really, even for me, and it probably is shocking to some folks, my work is not really just about democracy. Matter of fact, this country has actually killed people in the name of democracy. My work is about humanity. And to the extent that democracy supports the advancement of humanity, that is it. So we have to really recenter the values of how we value human life. The fact that we're calling human beings aliens, like that whole concept is crazy. Like we call it like aliens. Like, so the point is we have to literally center a different kind of values proposition around what it is that we value as a people, as a nation, as part of humanity. And then the last thing, I think that's around the vision, which I really believe that part of it, we can't just continue to be in the cycle. We're responding to what is, because what is was a part of a very limited vision by people who couldn't even see the humanity of the four of us that were on the screen right now, right? So that was a vision as long time, like it was very, very limited. What I think we have to do is we have to be visionaries, and we have to literally think about this question of what would this nation look like without racism? What would this nation look like without sexism? What would this nation look like if we actually valued and honored all human life? If we centered the notion of for the love of humanity, what are the possibilities that exist when people can actually operate in their agency, in their power? We have to literally use that vision to radically reimagine every single system in this country. That's what I think we should be doing now and going on in the future.
Woo, oh my goodness. Thank you so much. That was incredible. I wish I could spend the whole night with you all. It has been such a thrill for me to spend this time with you, Angelica, Latasha, Aijen. That's a wrap. I want to thank all of the folks who tuned in via Facebook and Zoom, all of our donors who make this work possible, our entire board of directors, our entire staff, and extra special love to Sonia Glover and Ray Jimenez for your incredible work behind the scenes to make this happen. Thank you and good night.